Welcome to Lakeshore Focus, a weekly show highlighting challenging issues, fascinating people, and important events in our region. I'm Keith Kirkpatrick. I frequently encourage people to run for elected office and get involved in their local government. The answer is most often, why would anyone want to do that? Great question. Here to give us an answer is one of those elected officials and a key city staff member, the Mayor of Hobart, Indiana, Brian Snedecor, and his Economic Development Director, Denarie Kane. Welcome to Lakeshore Focus.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
I'm going to get to that question in a minute, but I did just realize before we started the show that you're in Maryville right now. Did they really check you as you left Hobart to cross the street?
Yes, I had to check in at the front desk.
Oh, they carded you probably
That's
over
right.
here, I bet.
That is correct.
So, have you been on TV a lot of times?
Yes, quite a bit.
Okay.
Certainly on news programs and things like that.
Okay.
When my days in law enforcement, I had to do a lot of.
So you're a pro at this. Denarie, you were saying before we started, the last time you were on public TV was when?
I was probably 7 years old, and I had to dress as a famous Hoosier, so I dressed as Newt Rockney with my Girl Scout troop on Muncie's PBS station.
So were you a hit? I just want to know.
It was an easy costume. I put on my dad's sweatshirt and put a whistler on my neck and carried a football,
So it was.
and then ran around the studio like, Coach would.
So 7 years old, that was just a few years ago.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Like yesterday.
Good thing we got that clear. So my first question that I posed in the intro, why would anybody in today's environment would want to run for elected office?
Yeah. Well, I had been in law enforcement for 27 years and served for 4.5 years as the police chief in the city of Hobart. And there came a point where I felt I had to make a decision. I saw where there were things that needed to improve in the community. And kind of like what you have referred to in the past, there's no need to complain if you're not willing to make the effort to make the change. And so it came to a point where I felt like that if I saw there was changes that need to occur in the community, then I had to be willing to step up and be one of those that was willing to make the change.
So were you telling me you were a complainer before that?
I'm not one to complain, but I'm also one to assess where we can be better and be a better community. And I felt we were at that threshold, that crossroads. And
it was time to jump in.
Yes.
So Denarie, you're not in elected office, but you choose to be in government work. And these days, that's not always the best place to be, it seems like, with so much criticism of people in government. Why do you still stay doing it?
I find it very fulfilling. I've worked in now 4 different communities, and it's a way to make that community part of your life. You become integrated into the community when you work for it. Each one of the positions I've held, it's basically a way to, improve the city. Think of projects that need to be done that will benefit the public.
So what were the four
I worked
communities
in Fort Wayne as
Okay.
an urban designer, and then I worked for the City of Hammond as their city planner. I worked for the town of St. John as their council administrator and their planner, and then came to Hobart, where I've been almost 20 years come March.
Wow, so you've got some interesting roots. Are you originally from Fort Wayne?
No, I grew up in Muncie, but originally from California.
Okay. I always love to point this out. So brain gain, we gained you to our region, right?
That's right, it was a brain
gain for us. Brian, are you a Hobart person your whole life?
No, actually, I grew up in Gary. I graduated from Lew Wallace High School in 1977. Actually, though, if you walked out our property, you walked into the city of Hobart. We were that close.
What do you call people from Hobart anyway? Hobartans? No.
Well, Brickies usually is what they're referred to, but our community has expanded throughout the years, and we now take up a large part of Ross Township, and so there's been a lot of growth in the community in the past years. The Hobart school system only services a large segment, but not the full area of our community. So we have 3 school districts. Which
really?
Is,
okay.
Yeah,
I didn't realize
quite
it.
Intriguing.
And that was one of the questions I was going to ask you all. You're a community, and I even wrote this down because you have farmland, giant retail mall area, old downtown, urban growth, traditional housing, and a spread out industrial base.
Yes.
How do you manage that diverse a community? I can't think of any other place in our region, even in the Chicagoland area, that has that kind of mix.
Well, and I think that's a good point. And, you know, through growth, with the strategic I-65 and 94 corridor, which services our community, we still have a lot of areas of growth potential. But one of the things that we have focused on through our economic development department has been good, clean, light industry. And we now have certainly some areas, Northwind, which is located out on Mississippi Street by the Menards, a large development there. We also have on State Road 130, just as you approach Porter County, another light industry area. It's unique, our community, and what you just said is true. There's not many communities in Chicagoland that offer the diversity of our community. You know, and our education system has really drawn a lot of people to our community where they want to live here. They may work in Chicago, but they love living in the Hobart area.
So when you're doing economic development work and you have people coming there to kind of visit, or anybody to visit their town, and they drive through and they see horses and cows, I mean, what do they say to you? Isn't it a little weird that you have horses right here in the middle of town?
They like the contrast, the open space plus the authentic downtown, and the older neighborhoods, as well as the opportunity to look in new subdivisions. They like that contrast.
So from the city, you point out that they're right next to the cornfield. They can pick corn. You just don't tell them it's seed corn.
That's right.
Because they won't know the difference anyway.
That's right.
Until they eat it.
That's right. They just like living by it.
We'll play that trick on the urban people,
That's
right? That come out of Chicago. Now we'll get all this mail from Chicago saying you're making fun of people in Chicago. Yeah. But that's okay. I mean, it is a little bit different to be in that kind of mixed community. Does that make it harder, again, to manage all of that? I mean, how do you deal with the different kinds of people that fit in all those areas?
Well, I think it does make it difficult sometimes to manage from a public safety perspective. You know, our city, you know, during the holiday season with our retail corridor with, you know, South Lake Mall and the other retail areas, we can swell to close to 100,000 people in our community at one time. Well, our community generally is 29,000 people. So you can see planning from a public safety perspective, police, fire, and ambulance, sometimes that's quite challenging. So yes, it does, as a community, trying to plan for that and also have a budget that can handle that type of influx of people at one time. But you know, I guess it's a healthy thing to have. I'd rather be in that situation than to be a community that's starving to try to get growth. Right. You know, Denarie has done a wonderful job in outreach to business wanting to locate in our community. We're constantly fielding prospectus from Chicagoland businesses wanting to come to Indiana to locate, as well as other areas, Ohio and the Midwest. So I think the future is very bright for Hobart. We have a lot to offer. You know, sometimes communities on the west side of the county, they've pretty much kind of reached their limitations as far as growth because of geographical reasons, where Hobart still has a lot of opportunities to expand.
You do have all this potential. How do you deal with it? I bring groups through, you know, you've met with us several times. We bring our leadership
Great students.
group through. And I always say, this is so interesting. I bring you into Hobart because it's, in some ways, it's almost off the beaten path. The fringes are, but is that a plus or is that a negative to the fact when you see that you have it? I mean, you got roads going through there, but they zigzag all over the place.
I think a good point, and Denarie can touch on some of the ideas with our downtown, but State Road 51 goes right through our downtown sector. And I think a lot of people, when they've had the opportunity to take that trip through our downtown, they love it, they want to come back. This is what draws them to communities such as Hobart, is they have, certainly you have the big box stores on the Route 30 corridor, but coming downtown on a lakefront, you just don't find that in many communities around the country, where you can have a downtown that still has that heritage, that history, but yet still has the draw of a lakefront. And Denarie, working with Parks and the Redevelopment Commission, they've taken some real aggressive task dealing with our downtown with the facade programs and our lakefront development. And I commend her and the Redevelopment Commission for all the work they've been doing in reinvigorating our downtown.
So part of this is kind of meander through Hobart, right? It's kind of, maybe that's, I can tell you that it's a slogan.
We're actually doing a rebranding of our downtown as the Lakefront District, and we're in the process of creating some physical manifestations of that through our gateways into the downtown. One of them is under construction right now.
I've heard about that. What are you going to be doing on those gateways?
Well, we hired a firm out of Indianapolis, Ratio, that came in, worked through a design process with us. They identified kind of the 4 gateways into the downtown. We have the first one under construction along Old Ridge Road. And basically, it's a pylon with a new logo that represents the Lakefront District. And then...
So what's a new logo look like?
It's kind of a stylized part of the clock tower that's in downtown. Okay. And then building on that, we'll be undertaking probably a 3-year marketing effort to using traditional as well as social media, get the word out about downtown. Also coupled with that, we have a wayfinding signage program that will be implemented soon to help guide people to the attractions within the downtown and to help get them downtown.
Talk about those 2 concepts, because you hear a lot of communities saying that they are trying to improve their wayfinding. That's one. And the other is they're trying to create gateways. Everybody, you hear this in almost every community. Why are people trying to create gateways?
Well, because you want people to recognize that they've arrived in a special spot. And I think by drawing attention to that, you just help build on that brand and public awareness.
In some ways, it's kind of like the old gates to the walled cities, right? You can clearly see there's an entrance to it. So what's the big deal about the wayfinding, Brian? I mean, can't people find their way around these towns? I mean, come on, it's not like you're in downtown Chicago.
Yeah, well, let me tell you a little story. When I first started in law enforcement in Hobart, I grew up in Gary. Well, everything was presidents and states. It was a very easy process to learn the streets. When I was employed with the police department, it was amazing trying to learn the city because of the lake. The lake breaks up all the streets. So people trying to find an easy route, sometimes that's not easy to do when you have a large lake such as Lake George that careens through your downtown. So I think the wayfinding is certainly something that we want people when they're coming through. We want them when they're on Route 30, maybe leaving the mall, going back to Porter County or wherever, and they see signage for maybe Festival Park, and they say, let's go see what's going on at Festival Park this weekend, because Hobart's always got something going on the lakefront. We want them to be able to find that without having to stop and get directions.
I will confess, I think I get more lost in Hobart than any place around, because I'll be driving around and like, where in the world am I? But I think a part of this is because of the vast open space that you have there. And again, you're saying that that's really quite an asset for you all.
Yes.
What do you find is the greatest challenge that you're facing as a community right now?
I think dealing certainly with tax distributions. I think that's always going to be a challenge in today's world. Certainly, with the taxing structure with Indiana. I think that's something, though, as elected officials, if we work closely with our residents and we can explain to them what we're doing with the tax dollars, people, when they see what you're doing, if they see tangible results, people will buy into what you're trying to do. I think that's a big issue. I think the other main issue is the competition between communities for attracting business and residential development into your communities. Most businesses now, when they're coming into a new area, if they're going to give significant employment opportunities, they want you to step up and offer incentives. And we in the City of Hobart, we have saw the value in doing that, being responsible in what we offer. But if it brings in good paying jobs, it creates a good work base, provides good union labor, construction. Those are all things that we feel are important to the vitality of our community as well as other communities.
Let me ask you this, either one of you. you said it helps when people can see what you do, yet we know, and I've seen over in Hobart how much digging you guys are doing and fixing the sewers and the water lines and the infrastructure. Yes. I guess people see you dig in the hole and complain about the blockage to the road,
Yes.
but do they really see the benefit to that, or is there like,
Well, I've always said what's underground usually is out of sight, out of mind in the minds of most people. But when they see the construction going on, they realize there is a major issue. When we did the sanitary and stormwater improvements here recently, people saw, and certainly there was frustration with timetables when you're dealing with construction, but now that it's finished, many people now see the end result and they're very, very happy. But, we talk about taxpayer dollars, the situation with the option income tax and the dollars committed to economic development and public safety. People that are going to be paying into this, and I stressed all the community leaders that I've talked to, they have to see tangible results in what that money is going to. They have to see improvements to the infrastructure.
Well, let me ask you about the public safety issue, because there are times that people want to see a cop, and there's other times they don't want to see a cop, right? So how do you reconcile that?
Well, deterrence is always a good thing. High visibility in the areas where you need police presence, but certainly you want people to feel confident, both in their police and fire services, that when they call, they're going to have qualified, timely response.
Going to get something.
Sure.
Denarie, how do you? I've always had this kind of issue, I guess, about our communities that compete against each other, trying to bring, a small manufacturer in that's going to bring in 50 jobs, and we're kind of fighting back and forth on who's going to get that, when in the end, for the most part, whoever they hire is going to live wherever they live. How do you resolve that issue, when you have a victory or they have a loss, or you have a loss?
Well, actually, in the last probably 7 or 8 years, if not longer, there's been meetings monthly of all the local economic development organizations. And we've all basically agreed that what's a win for us individually as a city is also a win for our region. So whether a project ends up in Hobart, Valparaiso, or Maryville, it's a win for the region. A lot of times site selectors have some very specific criteria that certain communities can meet and certain others can't, and we recognize that.
Has that cooperation always been there?
I've been here in Hobart 20 years, I'd say no, but I'd say in general the last, like I said, 7 or 8 years, it has been very evident, I think.
So it's a good message that we're seeing our government units cooperate, particularly in economic development, to help each other. How do you see Hobart fitting into this region? I mean, I often see mayors who look like, I'm all about protecting my turf and ignoring the region. How do you see that?
Well, I will say that, as you have seen over the last few elections, you're seeing a lot of younger mayors in office.
Including yourself, I see.
Yes. And, that is one thing that as mayors we've come together and talked about the value in working together. Generally, people don't look at geographical boundaries as a decision on why they're going to go or do something. And so as mayors, we've said, hey, it's time to work together, because when one benefits, we all benefit in Northwest Indiana. And I will say that that's extended not just in Lake County, but Porter County, LaPorte County. I have a great relationship with Mayor Milo from LaPorte, Mayor Snyder in Portage, Mayor Costas in Valpo. We all understand the value of working together for Northwest Indiana. And so I think that's a very good point that you bring up. We have to have that relationship. The idea of keeping everything within your own boundaries of your community, that's why communities die.
I like that concept. We're down to probably about 40 seconds here, but I want to give you the $10 million question. If I gave you $10 million and you could spend it on one thing in your community, what would you spend it on? $10 million. One thing.
I think aging infrastructure replacement. It's so critical. It's the backbone of the community. And there's a lot of aging infrastructure that needs to be replaced.
Water and sewer and so forth.
With our community and the age of our community, she's point on. That is most important is our infrastructure and the age of our infrastructure and the need to replace it.
I hope everybody that watches the show gets that message about how important our infrastructure is. Thank you both for being here and for the leadership you both provide in our community.
Very much. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Thank you.
It's so easy to complain about government. In fact, it has become a national pastime. Just eavesdrop on nearly any conversation and it will eventually arrive at the bashing of our incompetent, overreaching, excessive, tax-hungry government. Our first mistake is that we throw everyone associated with government into one category and say they are all bad. Government has many dimensions and the simplest to define is level. Remember from grade school? There are three: federal, state, and local. We also need to note that there are those who are elected, others appointed, and many who are employees. Do the math. 3 levels times 3 divisions, and you have 9 groupings. If you blend political affiliation into the equation, the number increases to 18 categories. How can we possibly throw everyone into one category and condemn all of them? If we stop doing this, we will begin to notice that there are people in all of the groups and at all levels who are doing a good job, some even excellent. Now that we are assessing specific individuals, let's take a look at our accusations. Unethical, ignorant, and self-serving are broad descriptions. What did that person specifically do that warranted our label? Did he or she really cross that line and move into an area we describe as poor behavior and performance? Or is that individual just daring to see an issue differently than we do? As participants in this experiment we call democracy, where do we fit in and what is our responsibility? Are we fully informed on the issues and problems at hand? Have we attended any meetings, read any materials, or talked to anyone? Have we listened to the thoughts of the person we are questioning or even shared our analysis, not just our opinion? If we cannot say yes to any of these questions, maybe we should change what we are doing. There will always be some people in government who are incompetent, unethical, and even criminal. They need to be held accountable. In the meantime, let's stop complaining about all of them and try a different approach. Thank you for watching Lakeshore Focus. We'd really like to hear your thoughts about today's show. Did you agree or disagree with the ideas you heard? Email your comments to focus@lakeshorepublicmedia.org or reach us through our website, which is listed on your screen. Join us next week for another Lakeshore Focus. I'm Keith Kirkpatrick saying, make a positive difference in our world today.